Hi, I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. Today we're going to be working on this wonderful fall harvest garland. And I fell in love with one I had seen a while back at a festival, and the lady said it was so old that she wanted to throw it away, but it was just beautiful and I thought it was wonderful. So I decided I needed to come up with a way to make these. Now, first thing is I didn't want to go out in the cornfield and start picking husk, and it's just a mess, and you want to be careful when you're working with corn husk anyway, especially if you have allergies. So I went and I picked up tamale shells. They're corn husk, but they're for tamales. And you can pick these up in your grocery store. Look for them in your ethnic food section or your Hispanic food section. Also, another thing that I found, that I could find them sometimes at the dollar stores, which is really, really wonderful because I preferred the cheaper ones over the more expensive ones. And I'll talk to you a couple things that I liked, but the thinner they were, the more they absorbed the color, and so the cheaper ones worked better. The thicker they are, the harder they were to absorb the color, so the better the brand was not also better for what I wanted to use it for. And you get tons in a bag. You open them up and they just keep multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Another thing that I look for when I am using them is I want to find ones that come to a tip or a point at the end. That is a bonus for me instead of just being cut straight across. I really liked the tip, and then we're still going to cut the other end as well. So first thing I sat down is I already have one tip at a point, and I didn't want the other tip straight across, is I took my scissors, and make sure you're not using a good pair of scissors. These are hard on your scissors. And I cut the points, and I did that while this was dry. Then I took these and I took them to my sink and threw them in warm water and started pulling them apart. So I pulled them all apart. Now you could also do this in a natural color too. You wouldn't need to color it if you didn't want to. So I got them all pulled apart, and then I put them into a bucket. You want to make sure that your bucket doesn't have any holes or anything in it. And in my bucket, I laid them all down, and I put about a gallon of water on top so they were completely covered, and I had room to work them and wiggle them, and they could move around a little bit. You don't want to put them in like this because then your color is not going to get into these ones that are so tight. That's a real important thing to remember. That's why we pull them all apart, is so the color gets applied evenly. And we also want to use the color, I put the color on them once they're wet. So I took my RIT dye, and unfortunately I didn't save one of the packages. I used the little package of RIT dye, and Michael's carries it, your craft store carries it as well, as you can usually find it in your grocery store, like in the laundry section. Now, I didn't like the liquid as well as I actually preferred the little box. The liquid is twice as much as you need, and you can just pour it right in and it's fine, but you've got extra. The little box will have tons and tons and tons of leftover dye for you to do other projects with, so that one is just fine. And I boiled 2 cups of hot water. I put my dye in and I dissolved it, and then I poured it into my gallon of water, which I already had my corn husk in. You kind of stir them up here and there. It says that you can allow them 30 minutes. If you want them brighter, leave it longer. I do not recommend doing the water more than that because we want it as concentrated so we get as good as color as we want. Now, I did 1 bag per each color that I did, and I did 4 colors for the fall. I did the red, the yellow, the orange, and the brown, and I feel the brown is really important base color to kind of tie that all in. It may not look that pretty when you're doing it, and I had a dark brown and it was almost a purple, and I would suggest maybe the medium brown instead, because I kind of went back and played putting some red or some warm colors in to kind of pull it out of the purple mode, instead of just a straight dark brown. So use a lighter brown if you have that ability. Another thing that they have at Walmart is fabric dyes, and these are packets. Follow the instructions on anything you're using because everybody does it a little bit different. These happen to tell you that at some point you put salt in them and different things. So just make sure that you follow those instructions. And I'm going to be doing a lot of crafts this season, even Christmas crafts with the corn husk. I really liked working with them. I'm going to make some wreaths and some different items. And I did 2 garlands. And then I had some left over for some of these other things. I figured I've got it. I've got the dye. Let's just use it up. Also, if you're a gourd person, as long as your gourds are clean, you can use them to dye some gourds. All kinds of fun things once you've mixed that up. So it really goes a long, long, long way for your money. Okay, let's get started. Once I did those, and I've got them all soaked, and I rinsed them with cold water and got all the color out. And I just did mine in my kitchen sink. I have a stainless steel sink, so I had the bucket in one side. Then when I was done, I just transferred them over. I was really surprised. It's the first time I've used a RIT dye. I really liked the product, and it didn't make a mess. I really was expecting more of a mess. And I laid a table down with a towel that I didn't worry about getting stained, but you rinse it out really, really well. I probably rinsed them 4 or 5 times, but you want to leave them damp. So if you're getting ready to do your project, you can kind of put a towel over them and keep them damp, and they'll sit. I kind of threw mine in the bucket and set it aside. Down at the bottom, they were still damp. If they're not damp, just go back to your sink and just wet them lightly again just to get them all nice and damp. The reason being is because these are pliable, unlike your ones that aren't, and you're going to break them and different things like that. So you want to be really careful and wet them. Make sure they're pliable before we start using them. Now there's a couple of other projects that I do have them dry on, but if you want to use them pliable, you want to make sure that they're damp. So I used a thicker rope. This is going to be the base of our garland. And when I first started, I thought, oh, I wanted 8 feet long, and I got to 6 feet, and there's so much of it that I decided 6 feet was just fine. But wouldn't this be wonderful down the center of your Thanksgiving table? And if your table's longer and you wanted to do just one, then do that. It would be beautiful. So I'm going to take the rope, and the first thing I'm going to do is measure off 12 inches. The reason I'm going to do that is it's going to give me a base to tie up against. But also, if I want to turn this into a swag or decorate or put it up on the fireplace, I've got something to tie onto. So I think that's real important with a garland. So we've got that, and I'm going to use my painter's paddle wire. You usually find it in the gardening section. You can usually find it at the craft store, dollar stores, different thing like that. It's the kind that's coated with the green. The reason that I'm using this over the the colored wire is I don't want it to rust over the years, or if it got a little bit wet or anything. That's real important to me. I don't want it to rust. So I'm just going to come in here, and we're going to tie off just above that knot. And if you have allergies, you notice I'm coughing a little bit, you might want to wear a mask. You might want to wear the mask that you use to work on with your gourds or different things like that, just so you don't get this up into your lungs. And I just twisted that off and then just wrapped it around my rope here. And you don't want this so skinny either. You want to make sure that that's thicker. A little bit of water here, and I'm going to start, and we're going to work with 3 corn husks at a time. And what I do, a lot of times your corn husks want to just curl up just like that. We don't want them curled up. We want them out as much as we can and gathered in the middle so this fans out nice and easy. Now I've got my sharp point on this end, and I want to put my bigger one on the bottom and build two smaller, because you have big and smaller ones. If you don't, they're all the same size, that's okay. But I put the fat end on this side and the fat end on that side, so you don't have a fat end over here and a skinny end over here. And then I have a small piece that I put in the middle. So I'm using 3 different pieces of the corn husk. Now what I'm doing is I'm bringing this over. We'll make sure we get a close-up shot of this, and we'll do it a few times. What I'm doing is I'm wrapping this first around the corn husk. I'm not actually on the rope. And then once I've wrapped it around, I'm picking up these 2 top layers, and then I'm going to wrap it around, coming up just a little bit above that, completely around, and then we're going to come back and anchor it onto the rope this time. And you want to keep this close. So this is going to go all the way around, and it's easier to keep your wire on the paddle than it is to turn it loose. Now, I'm going to show you, if you just did this without doing that second loop, you're just going to get a garland just like that. It's not going to have any height on it. It's just going to be flat instead of this wonderful little top piece here, because if you look at my garland, it's real full. It's not flat, and it looks like a big fluffy piece all the way across. So, and this is going to take up about 1 inch. And we're going to go to our next color. And we're going to do the same thing again. And I'm going to use my bigger piece on the bottom, scrunching that all up so those show. I'm going to flip this piece over, and then my smallest one is going to go in the middle. Remember, rotating each time which bigger side that is on, and we're going to tie on our second piece. So our second piece, again, loop it all the way around, pick up the top 2, loop those coming up just a little bit. You don't want the wire to show too much. It will cover it up once it fans out. So see, we're getting that standing up there. Now this is a huge piece here. See how big that is? It's 2 of the other one. So we're going to come back in. So if any of them are that much bigger than the others, just rip them in half. We're going to do our bottom layer, our middle layer, and our top layer. Okay, I forgot on this one to come back in and anchor it onto, so it's one complete, almost a thing and a half onto the cord. Now see, if there's a space like that between, just take it and the space with the rope, take it and just slide that up. You don't want it pushed so hard, you just want them set, you don't want them crunched together, you just want them setting side by side. You don't want any rope in between. So it's good that I mess those things up, because you will probably run into that as well. You also could take the scissors and shred them if you wanted to, instead of keeping them solid. So around the yellow, and keep this tight. Next up to that, pull up the top 2 layers and around them. Now let's not forget to anchor it off onto our rope here. So around, and we don't have a complete circle yet. One more time back there, so it's like 1.5 right there. Okay, let's do one more just to make sure we've got this. Wouldn't this be pretty also with Christmas colors? Do it red and green. I did dye my red a lot longer. In fact, I just let it set overnight, but it was a better quality corn husk, so it didn't want to absorb as well. So it's not going to hurt it if you just let it set. One more time. Around. And those 2 up. And around. And this will be a great thing for years to come, for your Thanksgiving dinners. And 1.5 times right there. All right, so we're going to pretend that I'm all the way done. And what you're going to do is measure off your 12 inches again and tie the knot right up here and just wrap your wire around and trim it off. There's no trick to it or anything like that. Now, I am going to give you one little trick here. I moved these around as they were drying and I put them in front of a fan to dry them faster. But if you were getting one that was separating too much and laying down like that, I got a clothespin and cleaned them together so that they would stick straight up. But you'll be surprised how much you can move them around while you're drying. If you're a gourd person and you have the mini gourds, dye them in with your Ritz dye, add them in here. I might add them later if you have holes and just wrap your wire around it and then just put it right in your garland. I think that would really, really be pretty. So you want to dry it completely. Once it's dry completely, you want to varnish it. You're going to have a flat back, which is really nice, and you'll turn it, so try to keep the flat back at all times on your surface so you don't smash anything down. And I just use some Krylon spray. You could use whatever spray on varnish. Obviously, it's going to be spray. Would be comfortable for you. It's going to help with a couple of things here. It's going to help keep your colors brighter, and it's also going to help with keeping the insects out of it. So we want to make sure that we do that, and so we can have it, you know, like again, I know I use this a couple times already for years to come, but when you're putting something so much into something, you really do want it for that. And then I took my piece like this, and I tied a knot on it. And if you even wanted to make this more longer than a foot, you could. And what I did is I hung a nail so I could hang this in a closet or up in my garage so it just hanged flat. You could also put some, you could come back in and put your, can't think of the word really, your trash liners, that's the word. When you're doing videos, it's not always that simple. Trash liners over it to cover it. It may take a couple, or some, just some saran wrap too, just to keep the dust and everything off of it as well, if you put it like in a garage or somewhere like that. But I'm going to keep mine in a shut closet where it's not going to get a lot of dirt and different things like that. So that is how we do our harvest time garland. If you are fall, whatever, you know, and like I said, take this, do different things with it. There's always a bunch of fun things you can do. I took the same thing, my leftovers, and I used a turkey, and we're going to use just the part where he has, you buy him real inexpensive and he's got the big fancy folded tail. So I just took that and used that as my base, and then I just used the corn husk to tie that all in, and wouldn't that really look great with your garland as well. So if you have any questions about anything we did here today, please email me at art@miriamjoy.com. We hope you have a blessed fall and Thanksgiving. God bless.